outdoor park in Ames, and I think 5% of the people heard me. So this is a nice change. This is good. Well, thanks so much for coming out, everyone. Really appreciate it. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ryan Melton. I ran for Congress here 2 times against Randy Feenstra, thinking about running a 3rd time. But as far as why we're putting together these town halls, right after the election, pretty much, the first week after the election, I started getting emails, social media messages from a number of folks in our congressional district asking to have someone step forward and put together these kinds of town halls, knowing that Randy Feenstra doesn't do them. And so I was in recovery mode for a while, but eventually I got enough emails and social media messages that I was like, okay, I can do that. And so I've partnered with a number of awesome folks. Davey back there, thank you so much for all the help you've given, and so many other folks here in Boone County in putting this together. But there's a few main goals I have with these town halls. We have this one today. We will be in Humboldt Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock at the community center. And then as of right now, next Saturday the 19th at 11 in Storm Lake, at the Storm Lake Elementary School. A few different goals I have for these town halls. First off, clearly a lot of people want to vent. There's a lot of people that are frustrated, and I wanted to give people a forum to do that. But beyond that, I also hope that you meet some folks you haven't met before, make a new friend or two, because we really need to support each other, right? It's pretty scary out there, so the stronger our support base, the better we'll be. But the third goal I have is, and I was really reflecting on this as I've been attending a number of, you'll have these Republican state legislative town halls or forums where the State House and State Senate rep will come up to the table. And oftentimes I was observing situations where someone in the audience would have a great question of these state legislators. But these state legislators are obviously very good at what they do, so they're prepped for a lot of these questions and they have their canned response. Now, me sitting in the back having run for Congress twice, I can pick out the 5 or 6 lies or falsities within the canned reply, but a lot of folks don't have that deep well of knowledge to be able to do that and confidently rebut in that setting. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to bring some experts on a wide variety of different issues that have been impacted by the current administrations at the state and federal level to help educate us some more as to the pressing issues of the day. So I'm going to have each of them come up and introduce themselves for roughly 3 to 5 minutes. They're going to tell us who they are, what organization they're with, and what some of the most pressing concerns they think are present in their area of interest, so that you guys know what kind of organizations are out there in the state that are fighting the good fight on the front lines. You know, you'll have a better sense of knowing where you can go to get that knowledge. And also how we can support these organizations in doing the work they're doing too. So those are some of the goals I have from these town halls. So we're going to start. We'll just start with you, Pete, and go on down. I'm going to pull up a chair here. But after everyone goes through the 3 to 5 minute introductions, we'll open it up to questions. And we'll do the best we can to answer and help you guys out with that knowledge. So, Pete, you want to get started?
Apologize for that. Peter Hurd, my name is Peter Hurd. I'm with the Iowa Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO. I'm the Secretary-Treasurer officer there, or one of the 2 officers there with President Charlie Wishman, and we also, I'm also the registered lobbyist for the Iowa Federation of Labor at the Capitol. The Iowa Federation of Labor has affiliates of hundreds of local unions around the state of Iowa, representing the vast majority of international unions in America. And we've seen the same attacks that you guys have seen all over. And when I think about this, to get this short, we are kind of in a time where I've grown up my whole life hearing, you know, first they come forward, you know, that slogan we've heard so many times over and over again. And labor unions are always part of that original few organizations or groups of people that they come for because we speak out against atrocities in government across the world. But I think what we're seeing right now that's happening is that they've come for everyone. I mean, I could sit up here and go through the timeline of attacks on our federal workers, stripping bargaining rights of 700,000 people who serve the people of this nation. But it goes beyond that, because each one of those people serves you and all the people in this country. And it's a travesty that we're going through this, but it does bring us all together because we are all interconnected in what makes this country great. And an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. And when I represent many labor unions at the Capitol as well. And when I see what's going on at the federal level, the stripping workers of the bargaining rights, we've seen that in Iowa as well, right? We've seen our teachers and public servants attacked. And what we see at the federal level is no different. So organizing and being here and getting people connected to the stories of the people out there who are being affected and your stories and sharing those, that's what we want to do. So I want to thank everybody for being here. We have some signs up there. Go ahead and take some of those hands off signs and protect union rights signs. And I just want to thank Ryan for inviting us today.
Morning. Okay, that's when you say good morning back. Good morning. Hi. We're going to have to get some coffee in here, Ryan. My name is Ken Sayer. I'm president of the Iowa Alliance for Retired Americans. You don't have to be retired, but maybe if you want to be retired, we'd be a good organization for you to look at. Because Social Security's been around for like 89 years, okay? And it's really never missed a payment. And regardless of what that one guy says about 300-year-old people getting Social Security benefits, I don't think that's actually true. What is true is there's 687,000 Iowans receiving benefits. That's a huge number. Me too. I'm very happy, when the 14th of the month rolls around or someday thereabouts. It's kind of a nice thing. And my 90-year-old mother gets Social Security. I mean, there's everybody in this room knows somebody that benefits from Social Security. So when you start hearing these things that, certain people in Washington are saying, on one hand, oh, we'll never touch Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. We won't do that. And on the other hand, it's like we have 300-year-old people getting it. Come on, we're not retarded. Here's the thing. What one of you in this room voted for Elon Musk for anything? And why is he getting access to our information? I think it's crazy. They say it's about efficiency, but that's not what it's about. It's about trying to find billions of dollars to give to rich people. And I didn't vote for that. I don't think anybody, even people who voted for those folks, didn't vote for that. It's time to stand up and say, no, this isn't what we want. This is not the country we want. And we're going to do something different in the not too distant future.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Jones. I live most of the time in Iowa City. I also live near La Crosse, Wisconsin, and I drove from there. This morning, I drove down here 4 hours because I think Ryan is an important person, and he's one of the only Democrats in the state that's had the courage to engage with me. I'm retired. I was largely pushed out of my job by two Republican legislators. I worked at the University of Iowa until 2 years ago. I retired, and Republicans and people in agriculture didn't like what I was writing about it, and so they acted to end that. And so one of these gentlemen mentioned venting. I think venting is good right now. I think articulating your anger helps focus your thoughts and directs your thinking where it should be. And I'm angry. I'm angry at what's happening to our country. I'm angry about what people did to me. I have a daughter that works at CDC still, miraculously, that gets threatening emails from Elon Musk constantly, simply because of what she does, which is study tick diseases. Because of that, she's a target by some of the worst people in our country. Okay? I'm angry about that. I'm angry about what's happening in Johnson County. The university is losing $200 million in funding from NIH. That's almost as much as what they get from the state of Iowa. I'm angry that these centers are being decimated at our universities. And frankly, I'm angry at Democrats, especially in Johnson County, that sit silent while all this happens. Okay? Because maybe they have some future political aspirations. My partner owns a painting contracting business with her twin sister. She tells me that Johnson County's already in a recession, that the phone has stopped ringing. Building contractors, the phone isn't ringing. They can't get building supplies. What they can get, the price has gone through the roof. You should be angry. We should be angry with this. We should demand better from our Democrats here in Iowa. And so I think about this, like you have two dogs. One's a good dog and one's a bad dog. And when the bad dog does something bad, well, it's hard to get mad at it because bad dogs do bad stuff. When the good dog behaves badly, you get mad, right? And that's what I'm mad about. Yes, I think Republicans in this state and nationally are evil. Yes, I do. But I think Democrats have a long way to go to step up to fight this. So thanks for coming today.
Good morning. I'm Crystal Cox. I'm a resident here in Boone, and I've been an English post-secondary education instructor for the last 18 years. I'm also the president of the Iowa State Education Association for my local chapter. And I want to echo your remarks about being angry about how things are going as well. ISEA represents K-12 teachers, professional staff, retired teachers, those who hope to become teachers, and community colleges. We believe that all students have the right and the access to quality education, and that means having all of the supports along with it. A lot of our Iowa and federal government is proposing changes that would cut special education, would cut academic achievement programs, and so much more. Here in Boone, the Boone Community School District would be impacted by those cuts to special education and academic achievement programs. It would impact what our schools have the funds available to support low-income students as well. Not having access to those resources impacts students' ability to learn. It means that the playing field is not equal for all students. That impacts where they go in the future, what they're able to do in the workforce, and how much of a fulfilling life they're able to have. I teach college level, and I see a lot of students that come in who have really tough lives. They're working full-time, they're single parents, they're trying to transfer to Iowa State, to a university. They're doing what they need to do, and I think that we should support them, that they deserve to have people who are making good choices for them and their education. There's current Iowa legislation that wants to make decisions for educators. that wants to cut curriculum that would teach students about the world they're in, the world they're a part of, and would expose them to stories and knowledge that they don't already have, that they need for the workplace, to work with other people in our state and other nations. There's legislation that has recently been passed that impacts my transgender students, that impacts my intersex queer students, that makes them feel unsafe at home and in the classroom. Those are things they shouldn't have to be thinking about when they come into my class. They shouldn't have to think about their safety. When you're in a fight or flight mode, you're not thinking about calculus, you're not thinking about research or how to write your essay. You're thinking about how you can get out of that space in the quickest way possible. These impacts to education, taking content out of our classes, taking away academic freedom for professionals to make choices about what they teach in their classes. This impacts our students, all of our students. If they're not able to have access to information that's accurate and shows them the whole picture, the whole story of who we are, they're at a disadvantage. I have students who have served in Afghanistan, who have taken time to reflect on their experiences there. And the power of sharing that information in class with their classmates is quite impressive. I love seeing that. I want students to be able to research careers that they're interested in, to be able to write about their personal interest. I want my students to be able to share about their immigrant experience. I want them to be able to research what will make them good nurses, what will make them good psychologists, and to learn about all of the people that they will be working with. These changes that our governments are proposing would not allow them to have a whole education or to be recognized as whole individuals that aren't just students in our classes, but are people in our communities and are working to be active members of a democracy. They deserve to have whole, accurate information to prepare them to do that, and I think Boone students deserve that too.
Good morning. My name is Ann Disher, and I'm with Common Good Iowa, and we're currently deciding whether we call ourselves a think tank or not, but for today I'll say we are an Iowa independent think tank that promotes policies that are good for workers and for families. And a lot of our work is at the state level, but I will tell you right now, we're actually spending a lot of time on federal policy. And I think I probably share anger that we're hearing in the room when I look at what's happening in DC. And I think there's kind of three major kind of areas of threat at the federal level. I think we've heard some of them. I think we have Elon Musk and his chainsaw decimating public employment and services. And then we've got tariffs that threaten a recession that hurts everybody. But I think I'm gonna focus my comments on the federal budget fight that is happening right now. Every member of our federal delegation, including Randy Feenstra, has now voted a couple of different times for a budget that will absolutely harm the heck out of low working middle income Iowans so that they can make space in the budget for tax cuts skewed to the ultra wealthy. And an area where they really want to cut to make that happen, or two areas really, are around our safety net, Medicaid and SNAP in particular. And I just, we're talking about 740,000 Iowans who are helped by those two programs. In Boone County, it's about 4,500 people who benefit from Medicaid and from SNAP, including 35% of kids in this county. So the idea that they're gonna tell you that, oh, we're not gonna cut benefits. We're just gonna cut waste, fraud, and abuse, which we can talk about later if you want to, or we're just gonna, make people work for their benefits, which we can also talk more about later. But I want to make sure that when you hear your representatives say that they are lying to you, that there is no way to pass the kind of cuts that they are talking about to Medicaid and SNAP without harming benefits for Iowans. And I will note, and then there is actually, we have this particular sheet of paper at the back of the auditorium, and on it are phone numbers for our congressional delegation, including Representative Feenstra, Senator Grassley, Senator Ernst. Representative Feenstra sits on House Ag, that is the committee where those SNAP cuts will go first. Senator Grassley sits on Finance, which is where Medicaid cuts will go first on the Senate side, and Senator Ernst sits on Ag, that will also see SNAP cuts. The fact that they have not moved these cuts yet, that they're still debating them, is because of the pushback that they're getting. We've actually been successful at slowing this down. So I encourage you to take that sheet of paper. If you don't already have those numbers on speed dial, call them all the time and tell them to stop hurting Iowans to pass tax cuts for rich folks. We can talk more later.
Good morning. Well, we're getting warmed up a little bit. I'm Tony Thompson, and I am from northern Polk County, so I ran for the state house last cycle. I am here because I'm a board member with the Iowa Farmers Union. So we are one of the ag organizations, perhaps the only one, Chris, in the state that actually likes to talk with you and support your work. I have some emotions myself, and I think maybe the best way to convey them is a story that I'm thinking of. There is a buck, a male deer, out wandering through the woods, and he comes across a doe, a female deer. And he gets a little bit excited in seeing her. And he starts, approaching her and starts to get a little bit more excited even. And then they're starting to engage, the buck and the doe, and they're having a good time, and they're getting really excited and really excited. And then out of the side, the smell of a mountain lion wafts through. And suddenly that buck has his instantaneous biological response. His pupils dilate as he's sensing fear and danger. His muscles tighten so that he's ready to fight or to flight, to run away. And in the spirit of fleeing, he has a bowel movement to release all of the extra weight so that he can run quickly. So as that's happening, 1/2 of a second later, he's having that mental cognizance about what's going on. And he's really angry because he's getting interrupted. He was just about to have a really good time with this doe, and he's being interrupted by this mountain lion. How dare he? So I feel the same way. I'm scared shitless and I'm pissed off. And with that, I'm supposed to talk about agriculture for 3 or 4 minutes here, and I need days to talk about all of the things that the Trump administration is doing that affects agriculture. I'll read the list. I won't go into detail on any of them, but you've heard of Local Food for Schools and the Local Food Purchasing Assistance Program, LFS and LFPA. That's where, now I'm going into details, but that's where organizations like mine, I run Prudent Produce, which is a food hub. And we've been ramping up for 3 years under the Biden administration because we want to provide healthy food for our communities. And so that community piece is really important to the Iowa Farmers Union. We had all kinds of stress for a couple of months about whether those grants that were continuing through this time were going to be frozen or unfrozen. Most of those where there have been grant contracts signed have been unfrozen. But we had been planning, we've been ramping up and investing in infrastructure to have these programs continue for another 3 years, and that's been discontinued. So that's frustrating. USAID, you've heard about USAID cuts. Well, that affects agriculture in the U.S. because the USAID would buy $2 billion worth of U.S. commodities to distribute as food products in those areas. Tariffs, of course, inputs are up, markets are down. We can talk about tariffs a lot. We'll save that. USDA offices were planning on cutting, this administration is planning on cutting something like 10% of USDA staffing, moving USDA offices out of DC, consolidating those that are out here, requiring USDA staff to work in the office, which means that they're not out distributed and easier to access in the county offices. Ag Research Service, ARS, is being cut. Natural Resources Conservation Services, so the NRCS, those are the two that are expected to be hit perhaps the hardest of all those divisions at the USDA. There was a Des Moines Register article just a couple days ago, bird flu staff, the National Animal Health Laboratory Network, so 3 out of 14 staff, and it's a network, right? So they're reaching out, coordinating amongst all the labs that are doing the research. Well, they're cutting the staff that is researching and connecting the research about why egg prices are so high. It's going to be hard to bring down egg prices in that direction. Federal Trade Commission is important to us. Lena Kahn, the Iowa Farmers Union, hosted a conversation with her a year, maybe 2 years ago in Nevada, focused on consolidation. I mean, farmers across the spectrum are caught between very small number of supply input providers and a very small number of markets to provide into. The FTC was helping to explore and to investigate that under the previous administration. That's kind of going away. And then, of course, the budget issues. So let me wrap up. I'll say I was in DC 2 days ago, so there's a Fairness for Iowa campaign. And I was there along with a few hundred other folks, including dozens of Iowans. And we're there because we feel like we had to go to DC to meet with our congressional representatives. They're not having town halls and that's across the state, right? So I think it sucks that we had to go to DC. If you ever want to go to DC, you're more likely to meet with folks. We did catch Representative Nunn, Polk County's Representative Nunn, in the hallway after our meeting. We had other folks from both Hinson's district and Marionette Miller Meeks' district. Those folks were not so lucky as to actually be able to talk to their representatives even after having gone to DC. So that's hugely problematic. That's why we're here. So Ryan, thank you for doing this for us, and I look forward to your questions.
All right, thank you so much to each and every one of you. Really appreciate you being here. Chris, that 4-hour drive, I felt bad having to drive an hour. Actually, I didn't. I mean, the 4th Congressional District, I drive 4 hours all the time, I guess. But I still feel bad hearing that 4-hour. That's pretty crazy. Well, Davey, are you back? Okay, you're ready with the mic for the crowd. So feel free to ask any question you have for us. And also to my expert panel, if one person jumps in and gives their 2 cents, that doesn't mean that has to be the only one. So we can feel free to take the time we need. I'm very used to being at campaign events where I'm told that there are tight time restrictions, and we're not going to do that. We're going to let it all out. We're going to dig deep. So don't hold back on the questions you have. So let's get started. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Questions?
Can you give us some concrete ideas of what we can do to fight back? You said stand up, organize, show up. So give us something concrete.
Well, I think what we've seen right now across the country is these organized events are working. It's showing people that you are not alone, for one, which is good for just our own mental health individually. But it shows the opposition that we are organized and that we mean business. And holding these events in small towns like Boone and across the state is incredibly important, because what we're seeing is people who never shown up to events before are showing up to events, and we haven't felt that in a long time. So I know it may seem small when you're doing something like that, but it's much bigger. And it's all part of the greater effort to shine a light on all of the atrocities that are going on, but that people are mad. And we need a direct message on this. And one thing that's been resonating with everyone is that the richest people in the world are taking over our government and kind of playing around with our lives. And anything you can do to shine a light on that and bring more people to the show. Because once you get somebody involved, it's contagious. We've all been there. You're here because of that same reason. Bring someone when there is an event. And there will be more events. That hands off on April 5th, there will be more. That's not the end. So just keep showing up and doing your part and hold these people accountable where they are.
You know, Ann mentioned that, you know, there's suppliers up here that have phone numbers. I routinely email my Congress folks and my 2 senators. And I don't know if you've ever written like Grassley or Ernst. You first get an email that says, well, thank you for your thoughts. We really appreciate hearing from you. We'll get you an answer soon. And after they get all their think tank people together, then every Republican senator in the country sends back this really spiffy letter, you know, which basically says nothing, okay? But to Pete's point, it's good for each of you. If you're pissed off about this, then do something. Make those emails go in, make the phone calls go in, and if you see them you probably won't see them on the street because they're hiding. But these kind of things bring out, I've never seen most of you before, and I did what Pete did for 35 years, and this is really cool. I mean, I don't like the idea that we got what we got to wake everybody up, but, you know, it's like the Japanese said, that Admiral said, we're afraid we woke up a sleeping giant. Well, you're all part of that giant, and we can make a difference, and elections aren't that far away.
So I neglected to mention during my introduction that what I do is study and write about the environmental consequences of agriculture. And so when I do programs, last year I did 37 programs, drove 7,000 miles to do those 37 programs. Very quite often people come up to me, and I'm not kidding you, they got tears in their eyes because they're so frustrated about the condition of our environment and the condition of our water here in Iowa. This city right here has a nitrate problem in its municipal drinking water supply. I don't know how many of you live here, how many of you know that, but you know, those sorts of things are not well publicized. But at any rate, people come up, they have tears in their eyes, and they ask me, what can I do? And, you know, oftentimes I think I don't have the answers, but one thing I do tell them is, look, at least on this topic, the legislature is a non-starter right now. The legislature is not the only governmental body in Iowa. And so look at Farm Bureau. What do they do? Say what you want about them. They're effective. What do? They have their county chapters. They go to county supervisor meetings. They go to school board meetings. They go to city council meetings. They do all of these things to advocate for what Farm Bureau wants. That's what we need on the left at the local level here in Iowa. We have huge issues with pollution at the city and county level here in Iowa. One of them is in Winnebago County. The Board of Supervisors is the biggest pain in the ass you'll ever encounter. But, you know, we're there and we're advocating for the common good of the county. And so that's what I would encourage you to do, is don't just look at people in DC, don't just look at people in the legislature, look at these local governmental units and advocate for what you want.
wasn't planning on answering. Well, I am relatively new to speaking out on issues. This is my first town hall. I accepted nomination for my local teachers union 2 years ago on a whim. Well, I guess I would try it out, see how things went. And being in that position has really kind of grown on me. Being able to listen to what people are saying and amplifying voices. I love that work. And that's something that we can do for ourselves. On the table, when you came in, you saw a sheet from the National Education Association with amounts of money that would be cut and lost for our students. Thinking about how that would impact your kids, your grandkids, the neighborhood kids that you see, and thinking about how that would impact their future, that gives you the energy, the ammo that you need to go to these forums and speak out on behalf of our students. Thinking about specific individuals and how they'd be impacted.
I think maybe we have all gotten those emails back from elected officials that don't really say much or argue with you. Having said that, members of Congress count the calls that come into their office. They count the emails. In the olden days, they used to literally get subscriptions to local papers and cut out clips. I assume they're doing more of that digitally now. They do pay attention. Now, I do think, like, when we're looking at our members of Congress, we look at the DOGE cuts, we look at the tariffs, and I think Congress is advocating for some responsibility. I'm not sure, frankly, how responsive they are, and that's a separate set of problems. I will go back to the budget piece. That is that they are working on it. I will tell you, like, on Medicaid cuts, Senator Grassley was quoted in The Hill being, let's just say, skeptical about those cuts. We've got senators from Kansas, from Oklahoma, a couple other Midwestern states who are saying we can't pass these cuts. I think actually the bridge to get Senator Grassley and to get Senator Ernst into that category is not that huge, but they need to feel the pressure. And so I would say keep calling. Call, was it vote early, vote often? Call early, call often. It's the collective effects of all of those various things that are gonna keep them from doing the wrong thing.
What can I add to so many great ideas already? Find your voice. I think that's really the thing. And I'm evidence that you don't have to know all of the depths of these policy positions. I am very much a jack of all trades, master of none. When a master of none is better than a master of one. Like, just having your voice and being able to engage in these conversations and reaching out. That's how we turn this around. That's very much showing up for the rallies and these kinds of things. People are noticing that. I mean, Zach Nunn is here. There were 5,000 people in Des Moines on April 5th. He's paying attention. Get those calls in, send letters. I think the way that we start to turn things locally is by building up Democratic neighborhood groups and county groups. So Lucas is over here. He's got a new role, I think, with Boone County Dems. You all know folks better, but please introduce them so people know who to connect with. My area is the neighborhood groups, so it's Bondurant and Polk City, these subsections, because Polk County has so many people. But engage with those, because it's part of it's, singing to the choir or preaching to the choir, where you're reinforcing that positivity, but you know that you're not alone. We're a bundle of sticks being tied together. We need that. And at the same time, we need to be going out into our other groups. I've been attending Rotary meetings with the plan to joining that, and the Kiwanis groups, like just getting out into the community so that those of us who are scared shitless and pissed off are engaging in the community, and maybe not being scared shitless and pissed off when we're in public, but allowing people to see that we're out there and about there. And we really are. There are a lot of blueberries in our red state.
I just want to add one extra thing that I learned as a union leader who seems to wouldn't because you do get these federal things that are always piling on, and local things and everything. I was at a conference, and we had a speaker come and talk about the big circle and little circle, and there's this giant circle where all your problems are, every single thing you think about, and everything in the world that's wrong. And then there's somewhere inside there's this little circle, and that's where you can control things. And what Chris said, down at the local level, do something there. We did a project in southeast Iowa with a group of people where we just kind of started talking about problems in their community, and somehow, just by chance of all the things we talked about, was this little road that led to the national cemetery down there. And people really got activated around that. And there was a woman who happened to be on the city council down there, and after a little bit, and there was a lot of different moving pieces of this thing, but that road's getting paved, and it was just a disastrous pothole road at one time. And just little things like that you can do in your community, like find something that's wrong and fix it, and we can also go to the protests that are happening too. So that's just my little piece of advice.
Yeah, I love that. I'll wrap up on this one. Well, running in one of the more conservative districts in the entire country, as a progressive Democrat, I feel the pain in that question because sometimes it can feel kind of hopeless, right? But there are a number of things that we accomplish in our campaign that are issues focused that I'm really proud of that wouldn't have happened if no one decided to run. And my last few times, no one else ran. In fact, the first time I ran, it was because literally no one else was going to do it. And I thought, I think I'm going to make a better option than a blank spot on the ballot at minimum, and I'll learn as I go. So a couple of examples of where I think, so my recommendation would be mastery of issues that really are intriguing to you, so that you can then go out to rooms of folks that normally would disagree with you and to educate. So a couple of examples of that. Because then what will happen is maybe folks that vote Republican or are independents but are right-leaning, the pressure they put on their Republican state electeds or federal electeds will sometimes be more, unfortunately, than when someone on the left sends that email or that phone call. So a couple of examples. So maybe I'm most well known among Republicans for my fight against the carbon capture pipelines and eminent domain abuse. And so when Summit was required by the Iowa Utilities Board, now known as the Iowa Utilities Commission, to put on a series of public informational sessions as they were looking to expand their pipeline, I went to a dozen of those in our deep red congressional district. So oftentimes I'd go to small town Iowa and I'd be the only Democrat in the room. But I have spent years and years and years on the carbon capture issue, on the eminent domain abuse issue, on the public health consequences that would come from them, on the scam as far as, it's not really a climate change mitigation tool, it's a scam. But anyway, so I was in Ida County, and I'm sure some of you know who Rep. Steve Holt is. Yeah. So this issue creates odd bedfellows because often I was the only Democrat in the room in deep red, small town Iowa fighting Summit. So just one issue in particular, I won't get into all the technical minutia of it, but on the carbon pipeline front, there is one big carbon capture pipeline fracture in a town called Satartia, Mississippi, a few years ago that asphyxiated dozens of people in this small town. 45 people went to the hospital and almost died from it. Now, this comes up all the time at these carbon capture pipeline informational sessions because obviously that is terrifying. Terrifying. And the fact that it's an odorless, colorless gas, right? So Summit, run by Bruce Rastetter, the multi-billionaire that seems to own just about the entire Iowa GOP at this point. So Summit, they're prepared for this line of inquiry at these public informational sessions, right? So I would use my time and I would point out the Satartia incident and that the spilling of the CO2 had poisoned and asphyxiated a lot of people. Well, they're used to these kinds of initial jabs, just like Republican state electeds and federal electeds are. They're anticipating these questions. They have a canned response with half-truths in them. The trouble is we don't often have the deeper well of knowledge and then punch back after their initial rebuttal. So I got up in front of all these Republicans in Ida County And I brought up the concern about Zatarsha and the asphyxiation from the CO2. And I knew they were going to say this, so I was ready for it. So they said, well, if you look at the Federal Regulatory Agency report from that spill, from that fracture, you'll find that they actually smelled rotten eggs in the air, which means that it was actually another chemical that caused the injury. Now, I knew they were going to say this, so I said, thank you, I'm going to have a follow-up for you in a minute. And they looked very nervous, because this is like the 10th meeting I've been at, and they knew I always had a follow-up, right? So I went back to my seat, and I pulled up that PHMSA report, the Federal Regulatory Agency for Pipeline report, and then I went back up and I said, hey, so on page 267 of that federal report you cite, the Federal Regulatory Agency actually came out and did air testing, and they found 0 of that chemical. They found 0 of that chemical. And they said, oh, well. And what happened was this room full of Republicans erupted in applause because we got them. So we need to have a deeper well of knowledge on issues that are compelling to us. Because when you look at the polling on these issues we're talking about, we're winning on the issues alone. So if we get locked in, laser focused on the issues, if we become experts, masters of those issues, and then we go to state legislative bureau or luncheons with our state electeds, typically Republican in this state, unfortunately, or pipeline meetings where mostly they're attended by Republicans, but we come in with that deeper level of expertise, we are going to get a lot of them, impress a lot of them, and say, oh my God, these people that I look to at this table have been bullshitting us the entire time, which is true. Because it's a lot of bullshit at those forums. But we have to be smart enough to counter their initial half-lie justification for what they do. And then once that happens, early 2022, when I ran against the pipelines, I was told as a fool's errand because no one would be able to beat Rastetter and his billions. That wasn't that long ago, right? And now, that project might die. We were told it was impossible, right? One more thing, super quick. I'm sorry, super quick. No one has accused me of being awesome at brevity. Early 2022, I started to talk about the cancer crisis in our state. Not many other people that were running for state or federal office were willing to touch it. So I often stood out, and I remember at a number of events, I'd have folks within the Democratic Party, not all of them, say, oh gosh, you can't talk about that because you're going to piss off farmers. And I said, farmers have a higher rate of cancer than baseline, and trust me, farmers don't like cancer either. They don't like it either. Now we're at a place where years later, the Iowa Farmers Union, I was so excited about this. They have now started cancer crisis listening posts all across the state, and I had the honor to help plan the logistics of the first one in our congressional district up in Spencer. And we got both Megan Srinivasan, the Democrat in the state house there, and Megan Jones, a Republican state legislator. They are both to speak out against the attempts to shield the pesticide and herbicide manufacturers from legal liability, which we won that battle again this year because we kept calling, we kept emailing, we kept creating public town halls and other listening posts. We put the pressure on the Republicans. We got a lot of Republican voters to say, why in the hell should Bayer be absolved of legal liability for the fact that their glyphosate, in study after study after study, is driving cancer and other health complications? Why would we be okay with that? They pressured their state electeds, the bill died, okay? So, mastery of the issues, go into spaces where people normally disagree with you, be confident in speaking to the facts, you'll get them, and then they'll help move the ball for you.
I just want to just support everything you guys are saying. One of the things I would like to recommend for those who have a smartphone, there's a tool, it's an app, called 5 Calls. And I don't know how many people are familiar with it, but man, it makes it so easy to call your representatives and your senators. That said, I have a master's degree in journalism. And the ironic thing that comes back to me from those lectures, the one thing that just always sticks, is that between interpersonal communication and mass communication, interpersonal is always more powerful. So, thank you.
My name is Laura. I want to start, if it's okay, with a little plug about some ways you can get involved. Excuse me. I am from Ames, but we have several different groups. I can also just yell. Several different groups that are working towards not just educating, but also taking action. So I represent a group called Democracy Every Day. There's an Indivisible Ames group. There's always League of Women Voters or Democratic groups. But our goal is to help people, to help educate people about what you can do, 5 calls, those kinds of different things. We also take action. There's a group that kind of protests with signs every Thursday and every Saturday in Ames. We organized the march, or not the march, but the rally, April 5th, and we had about 1,200 people there. If you didn't go, May 1st, we're doing it again. We'd love to have you there. So there are things happening. I'm sure there's things happening in Boone as well, but I would love to talk to you if you're interested in knowing more about some of the things that are happening at least in Ames. And I do have a question. So I hear what you're saying, and I was very excited to see the bill die last week. And so that's clearly issues that resonate with farmers. And I've lived here my whole life, so I have a lot of respect for what they do and how important they are. I also see them vote for Republicans who are not working in their best interest over and over and over and over again. What are the things? What can we do? How do we have those conversations? What are the issues that are actually going to speak to them to maybe help them change their minds? You gave a couple of examples, but I have a hard time knowing interpersonally what kind of conversation to have that's most important. So.
That's great. Oh. That's a great question. Well, a few things come to mind there. Again, running as a Democrat, one of the more conservative districts in the country, this comes up quite a bit. I'll start with why I think we're here, but then I'll give you some thoughts and ideas. I think we're here because, and I'm certainly not an insider, I'm certainly not a big money Democrat, that's for sure. You should see my car that I drove here. It's being held together by something called alien tape, which is better than duct tape, I can tell you. One of the big failings of the big money Democrats is they didn't, number one, they abandoned rural America, right? They did not fund an AM radio alternative to the Sean Hannitys and the Rush Limbaughs of the world. They did not fund an alternative to the Fox Newses of the world, right? So here's the thing, when you do both of those things, when you don't invest in infrastructure to counter the baseline narrative, and you abandon rural America and don't run Democratic candidates and support them in rural America, it's like we're living on 2 different planets, right? And so what would happen, this is one of the reasons that I like to go to county fairs, is because a lot of Republicans and a lot of farmers talk to me there. And at the beginning of those interactions, I'm a very chill, cordial, loving guy, I have Republican friends, I've talked to plenty of Republicans, Oftentimes there's this inflated confidence from a lot of these Republicans that come to me and start a conversation because they live in an echo chamber that is never challenged. So for example, I had someone look up to me at the Clay County Fair in Spencer, and they shook my hand and they introduced themselves as a Trump constitutionalist. And I said, hey, first off, thanks for coming to talk to me. I really appreciate it. Let me ask you, do you think Trump himself is a constitutionalist? He said, oh yeah. I said, okay. Did you see after the 2020 election when Trump called for suspending parts of it? Did you see that? All those are just words. I said, well, what is Trump doing right now? Well, he's running for president. And what do you do when you campaign? Well, you tell us what you're going to do if you get elected. And then I let it sit, and you saw something go off in him. He did not die on that hill. We talked for 30 more minutes, and it ended with a handshake. And so the first thing is acknowledging the failure of the National Democratic Party, who just abandoned rural Iowa entirely. But number 2 then is finding a way to get back in there. And that means finding candidates to run and supporting them. The DCCC, the DNC, they don't like me. They didn't give me a penny, and they probably never will. I'm at peace with that, whatever. It does bother me that the DCCC sends letters asking for money to folks like you. Not a penny of it will stay here. It'll all leave. But anyway, we need to find candidates at every level. Dog catcher, city council, board of supervisor, library board, soil and water commission, and build our bench, because we do not have a bench in the 4th Congressional District, right? Again, the reason I ran in 2022 was because literally no one else was going to do it. And the party said, yeah, it's hard. We can't find anyone. I'm like, that is not acceptable. That is just not okay. And so I guess I'm going to have to run for Congress while working a full-time job and having 2 kids. Okay. So we need to find candidates for every office. The other thing is something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Can you raise your hands if you know what this is, Dunning-Kruger effect? I got to educate a lot of people. This is great. So it's the psychological principle that the most intelligent folks are often least likely to take positions of leadership. That's one way to define it. There's other definitions for it. But the smartest people in the room are also the most introspective, best at being self-reflective as to their own flaws. So often the smartest people in the room talk themselves out of leadership. But the people who are not nearly as good at introspection can't find their flaws, and they think they're great. And that's why we have what we have today. And that's why we need to support each other, build up each other's confidence. We need to fight alongside each other and build each other up to counter that. The final thing I'll say is this. Kansas, roughly 10, 15 years ago, was run by a super conservative governor, Sam Brownback. In many ways, a Kim Reynolds clone. And he said, we are going to make Kansas the laboratory of essentially regressive austerity, super conservative economic policy. Well, 6, 8 years later, they almost bankrupted the state, which we're kind of on that trajectory too here in Iowa, if you've been paying attention. And it got so bad that the Republicans in that state said, whoa, this is not what I voted for. And now, in a deep red state, you have a twice elected Democratic governor. Okay? So it is never impossible. It is never impossible. I've spoken to so many Republicans who say, whoa, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. The challenge is we have to keep at it. In 2024, I spoke to rooms full of Republicans, and the message was pretty much, whoa, I love a lot of what you're saying. I like that you don't take corporate money. I love that you're an independent thinker. I love that you're not using anyone's talking points. I trust you. I can talk to you. But sorry, Ryan, you're a Democrat. I can't vote for you. Those rooms in 2024, more and more of them, I think, in 2026 are going to say, fine, fine. We have to keep digging and trying. This is something that's not going to happen overnight, especially since the big money Democrats have completely failed in their obligation to rule America.
So will you run it?
I'm thinking about it.
He's running. Boy, there's so many thoughts while Ryan's talking that I'm like, let's see. There's 100,000 farms in Iowa, give or take. There might be 2 or 3 voting members on those farms, right? It's only a couple 100,000 people. Farmers aren't swinging everything here. So yeah, we should reach out to them, certainly, but don't get overwhelmed by that. And then also, some of our farmers are progressive Democrats. There's a few of us out there scattered around the state, increasing in numbers, I think, and vocalization of our positions. The piece I would come back to is what's relevant on the local level. Farmers are part of a community, and what community issues are out there. So I think it's talking, if it's farmers specifically or rural areas in general, what's important in the community. In my state house district, a lot of the school boards, well, a couple of the school boards, there's the Moms for Liberty groups that are coming in with people that are trying to ban books. And so that's an issue that a lot of people care about. I think that's what we're talking about. Like, there's a lot of farmers that serve or have served on those school boards, and that is something that resonates with them. School funding in general is something that resonates. Medicaid is going to affect rural communities disproportionately to urban areas. Farmers care about that. The water quality piece, I mean, climate change piece, all of those, again, where they are on the spectrum, most farmers, if you get them one-on-one, know that there's something that's not right with how environmental, not everybody, it's the awareness thing, the wakening up to these issues, but most are certainly on the climate change. They're seeing changes in when things are greening up in the spring, or what pests and what pest cycles there are, these kinds of things. Or there's not as hard a freeze to kill off other, like, they're seeing those things, and maybe they haven't connected the dots. But if you can be the person that helps to connect those dots without being too confrontational, but leading people to do it, I think there's a lot of potential there. Anybody else?
So a couple. So a couple things I want to emphasize Tony's point here, that rural does not equal farming, okay? And so it frustrates me to no end when I see someone like Christina Bohannon, a law professor at the University of Iowa, someone you might expect to be, one of the most liberal members of our society, runs TV commercials where she's walking across a farmyard of some millionaire farmer. It pisses me off, right? It makes me mad. And so I think Democrats have a lot to learn here. Rural does not equal farming. Okay, we have beauty operators and nurses and teachers and small business owners and truck drivers and every other occupation you want to name in rural Iowa that are suffering. Okay, we have women giving birth in the bathrooms of Casey's. All right, and so why are we so laser beam focused on farmers? Most of them are not going to vote Democrat in the first place, and so I just don't get it. As far as the environmental issues, the Republican Party has done an excellent job of focusing this on Des Moines, right? Terry Branstad said that Des Moines declared war on rural Iowa with the water quality issue. Well, guess what? Des Moines has the capacity to cope with this problem, from a financial perspective. Whereas if you live in a town of 2,000 people and your well gets contaminated with nitrate, that's a burden, right? If your town has to drill a new well, that could be $1 million. That is a burden. Why do Democrats not touch this? It's very aggravating to me. On the cancer thing, all we had to do was vote no to cancer. That's all we had to say. But yet, one of the kingmakers in the Democratic Party, and I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to get sued by him, spent a large part of his career lobbying for Monsanto. One of the big money players in Des Moines, one of the kingmakers in the party. That's what he did. Okay? Rob Sands' in-laws, agribusiness giants, some of the richest people in the United States. So, look, if we want to go after the rural vote, great, let's do it. But, we got to think beyond this little, small piece of it, which is farming. Finally, this congressional district, yes, it's maybe one of the most conservative from a lot of perspectives, but it also gets some of the most federal money of any congressional district in the United States. This congressional district is number 5 out of 435 districts in farm subsidies, okay? And so this is a topic we need to talk about. We need to have the courage to talk about farmers when they come up at the county fairs and whatnot, and they like Trump, and they're against government, and they're against the freeloaders of government, they're against people getting Medicaid and whatnot. This county, number 5, okay?
So we are the freeloaders.
Thinking about rural America and education. So there's a huge push for workforce development programs and for community colleges to provide certification programs for students. And that's wonderful. But we also have students who are interested in the liberal arts, who are interested in transferring to four-year universities, who want to make a difference in their communities. And if we are cutting curriculum that supports that work, Iowa students aren't going to be able to contribute. They're not going to be able to stay within their communities and do the work of doctors, of educators, psychologists, sociologists, researchers, if we're not keeping that curriculum within Iowa. Iowans aren't just workers. We're hardworking folks, but we're also dreamers, we're ambitious, and we have other ways that we want to contribute to the state. So yeah, workforce development is super important, but we can't forget about our other students.
Here, come up here. While we're talking about rural Iowa, I will just reiterate the healthcare issue as well. I think we've already seen so many labor and delivery units that have closed. Nursing homes struggle to stay open. The governor has put some of her, at least bully pulpit towards mental health, bringing rural doctors. A lot of that is based on the fact that we actually have Medicaid available to help pay for those things, and that we protect Medicare as well. I'll tell you, public insurance keeps rural hospitals alive. And so that's another, I think, area where I think there's a lot of common ground, frankly, between central cities in Iowa and rural communities.
I have a question for Mr. Jones. First, let me say thank you so much for being here. I'm kind of blown away to be in the same room with you.
As am I.
Well, you mentioned the local water, and while I'm very concerned about us as a nation almost being in a police state, I am interested in the local water, and I have gone before the city council in the past on issues, and I want to know if something can be done on the city level, for the problem that you mentioned, the nitrate.
So, City of Boone has wells that are under the influence of the Des Moines River, and so there's thousands of square miles upstream in the Des Moines River watershed from the City of Boone. And so, again, it goes back to what I said earlier. People say, what can I do? Is there anything that any single person can do to affect this? And so, the answer to that is yes. And again, we have 3,000 drainage districts in Iowa that oversee the drainage infrastructure. Okay, so this part of the state, all the way into Minnesota, is drained by tile, right? That's the source of the nitrate in the drinking water. Well, guess who oversees the drainage districts in the state of Iowa? It's the county supervisors. And so we have to be at those meetings when decisions are being made about the drainage districts in this county. We have to be there saying, well, how is that going to affect the water quality in the stream that flows through the southeast section of whatever? And how is that going to affect the quality of the wells, 20 miles north of Boone, and so on and so forth. And so we have to be engaged at the local level. And so, again, the other thing you have to do, you just have to really get mean about this with people that are running for office on the Democratic side. They have to have the courage to embrace this as an issue. This is a quality of life issue for people that live in the state of Iowa. It is. We see the cancer rates, we see our streams and lakes are unusable, and so we have to communicate that to people that are running for office on the Democratic side.
Chris, I'll go a little bit further with that. I also became real concerned about the nitrate level in Boone's water. And when I asked questions about it, I was told by law, we're still under the allowed limit, except that's really high.
And so who made the law to put the nitrate level at that high level, which hurts us?
So I don't want to get too much into the weeds here and make this about me, but the nitrate is one of the original parameters regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act, going back to 1974. The standard was set at 10 at that time to be protective of infants. There was really little research at that time on the effect of nitrate in drinking water on the health of adults. Since that time, we see an association at levels well below 10, as low as 3 parts per million, that are associated with increased cancer risk in adults. There has been a petition in recent years for EPA to reassess the limit on nitrate in drinking water. And EPA has dragged their feet on it for many years. This goes through administrations of both parties, because they know it would be a cataclysmic thing if they lowered the drinking water standard. And so I think it's probably not reasonable that the Trump administration is going to take that and do anything with it. And so that's the history of the limit.
Chris, can you say why it would be cataclysmic to drop the federal threshold from 10 to 95 or 3?
So Des Moines, for example, like every utility that removes nitrate, they're just removing it down to 9.9, to where they have to meet the regulation. That's reasonable for the utility operators because it costs money to continue to reduce the nitrate in the drinking water as you lower it. And so, like Des Moines, 9.9, they're happy. There's years that people in Des Moines do not drink water with nitrate below 5. Okay, a person in Des Moines can go years drinking that high water. And so for the utility to remove nitrate at that level all the time would take a huge capital investment and then a huge increase in operating costs. And so that's the issue for water utilities. That's an issue for Boone, it's an issue for Des Moines, it's an issue was an issue for Sioux Center. And if I might say something about Sioux Center, I saw quite frequently Randy Feenstra crowing about rural water hooking up to Sioux Center. City of Sioux Center hooking up to Lewis and Clark rural water. Well, guess why Sioux Center had to hook up to Lewis and Clark rural water? Because they had high nitrate in their wells. Okay, we didn't hear anything from Feenstra about that, only that he was so proud of the work that he had done to make this happen.
Which, by the way, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act got the Lewis and Clark across the finish line up in Northwest Iowa. Of course, Feenstra voted against that, but he was sure at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for it. So a couple of thoughts on the nitrate thing. Thanks so much, Chris, for going into depth on that. As far as what we can do, very quickly, actually, to start raising awareness as to nitrate in our drinking water or a local creek, waterway. The Isaac Walton League, they have something called Nitrate Watch, which I'm a big fan of, where you can go, you can just Google it, Nitrate Watch Iowa or Isaac Walton League Nitrate Watch. And you can request nitrate testing strips for free. The only obligation is then when you do a test, you have to report it to their system, because then they show what the nitrate levels are across the country. And I'm going to start doing that this year. I'm actually kind of giddy about starting that because I have my test strips waiting. I'm locked in and ready to go. The other thing is, if you guys want more info on this, there was an Iowa Press episode. Do you know what Iowa Press is? It's the show where both Feenstra and I were given a debate offer, and Feenstra ducked it both times when I came on that show. So, Chris, I think this was maybe about a year ago. So David Swierney. Swierney is an amazing guy, an expert on the cancer crisis in the state. I think his last name is Cwiertny. Is that right? So he was on Iowa Press along with the CEO of the Des Moines Waterworks talking about this very thing. And the last question that these two folks were asked by the panel was this very question around nitrate level, federal threshold, and feasibility of lowering it. Because every data point suggests that the 10 is way too high. What Chris didn't say, Chris could talk all day about this, but just to highlight how crazy federal regulations are around nitrate in our drinking water. The reason it's at 10 is because it was found that if infants drank water with 10 or more, they could get blue baby syndrome and die. So that's where it's at. That's it. As Chris said, they did further testing beyond that really to set that threshold, but that's why it's there. So as long as it doesn't kill babies, they're good. It's insane. But on this Iowa Press episode, which you can find on YouTube, David Swearney, the CEO of the Moines Water Works, which I don't know his name off the top of my head. What was that again? Oh, wait, thank you. That last question, you could tell that both of them know, like flat out, it shouldn't be a 10. It should be much lower. But they had to be honest and say, just like what Chris said, that if we were honest about this and really cared as much about public health and about cancer as we say we do, and we lowered that rate to 5 or 3, or some folks say it should be 1, it would be arguably impossible to do. Because without addressing the root of the problem, we don't have enough money to do that much cleanup. So it's a dire issue that I spoke a lot about, and I'm thankfully starting to see some other Democrats talk about, but not nearly enough, not even close to enough. So thank you for the question.
And we've got to go upstream and bring that back to agriculture, obviously. We shouldn't be trying to take the nitrates out of the water. We should be going upstream and asking where are the nitrates getting into the water, so that we've got leadership on the agricultural side of things. It's doing cover crops, it's doing edge of stream buffer strips, it's doing the kinds of things. It's crop rotation. We can go down that list all day long. I mean, Chris has a whole lot of solutions. I've got ideas for solutions. There's things that we can do from an agricultural standpoint rather than just relying on corn and beans. And we've got to go upstream to do that. Who's going to do it? I don't know, but we've got to.
Just a quick comment on the water quality. The county of Boone and all other counties have water testing. If you live in the rural areas, your water testing is free. There's a grant that covers that, and you can apply. There's online. I built that system when I worked there. It's quick and easy. And but I would watch those reports come back from the state, because through the online app, it's emailed back to the applicant, and I emailed myself a copy as well, blind copied myself so I could keep an eye on it. And the number of our rural residences in this county where the water is not safe to drink, and I'm not talking a little over 10, I'm talking over 100. 10 times, 100 times the safe limit. And it's not just the nitrates, it's coliform. It's literally crap in your water. And it's not safe to drink, and it's not safe to bathe your small children in. The number of chemicals that they test for, and the high ranges that we've seen, and people who live in these rural communities and are not drinking city water, in these rural areas, they may not be aware that their water is poisoning them. And I really encourage you, you can get it tested and it costs you nothing. But in the city, you can also ask the county you could file, one of those requests and and there's a small fee, it's like $10, $15. It's for peace of mind and to know what's in your drinking water, it's well worth it.
And beach closures, it's quality of life issues, and these are the kinds of things that we could be talking with people about, right? Like everybody has kids or grandkids that want to go to the beach, and Big Creek is closed, and I don't know the recreational water around here, but I'm sure there are closures also, right? So it's those kinds of things that we need to be talking about, and it seems like it's getting easier and easier because the alternative side is like talking to Representative Nunn on Thursday. He's like, we've got a $38 trillion national debt, and what we need to do is to grow the economy. Well, no, there's other ways that we can reduce that debt other than just growing the economy. Growing the economy for the last 40 years is what's gotten us to that level of debt. So maybe let's think about it differently And I pose to you that the way to think about it differently is to be talking about quality of life, not efficiency, but what do we want? How do we want to live? My Doge analogy, I gotta get this out real quick. I'm sorry that Liz left the room when I'm gonna say it, but Doge, everybody agrees that we should be cutting fat. Nobody disagrees with that. But Doge isn't just cutting the fat, they're cutting through the meat to break the bones that our democracy is based on. And we've gotta call that out.
I've got a question over here.
And while you head over, I'm just gonna say that, another way we cover costs like that is we tax rich people at the degree to which they should be taxed. Both at the state level, the state level, you can go back to 2017, and how many tax cuts have we done? And they are all overwhelmingly skewed to the richest Iowans, right? We cut inheritance tax. Who benefits most from that? Rich people. We've done away with our progressive income tax. We now have a flat tax. Who benefits most from that? Rich people. And then we slowly shrink all of these services, right? And we do it in this very subtle way where it's like we fund schools at 2%. And the Republicans say, well, this is the most money we've ever given to schools. Well, what's the inflation rate right now, right? And we do this year over year, and we're like we don't almost notice the way in which we're slowly being suffocated by not being able to provide adequate public services.
And I'm going to piggyback on that, actually. I am a state worker. Been working for the state for about 2 decades now. First started under Bill Sack, and I've seen a ton of changes since then. I think this is a question basically for Pete. I was around when Chapter 20 was just completely gutted. And I know we're talking a lot about federal workers here, but I think it's really important to also focus on state workers because we are in rural communities. We're in Des Moines, sure, but we are scattered throughout the state. And we're one of the biggest employers is the state of Iowa, in the state of Iowa. So my question is there any political will to bring, to basically reverse the changes that were made to Chapter 20? I know the governor just made a big announcement yesterday. Do you think there will be political will if the Democrats take over to basically reverse that?
I would say that with current legislative makeup, there is no political will. Just to give you an example, we had our legislative conference a couple of years ago. We had a really brave woman who lost her husband, who was a correctional worker, and he was murdered at the prison. And just to simplify the way the collective bargaining law was made, was that police and fire basically got to keep their bargaining rights, the majority of them, but all the other state workers lost their bargaining rights, and including correctional officers who guard murderers and rapists and, the worst of the worst. So they don't even have it. So after this woman spoke, we went and found a senator, who's a powerful senator in Iowa, Senator Schultz, and she asked him about that, putting them on there. And he said that something of the sort that they work in a contained environment. So even if we can't even give bargaining rights to people who protect our, like the worst people in Iowa, we're not going to give them for the people who plow our roads and who test our water and or teach, or you name it. Every job is essential. Just like the federal workers, the state workers have been running as lean as a machine can ever run. We've seen this throughout so many years. It just gets cuts and cuts and cuts and cuts. And these people are working their tails off to serve people of Iowa. And they deserve every bit of a say as any other worker if I was working in a factory or anything over their bargaining rights. So if we're gonna change that, then yeah, we do need to change who's in charge right now, because there has been no movement since 2017 to help any public worker in Iowa get their rights back. And the result of that has been terrible. Like, the morale is down, the workers are down, there's no say from the people who work there, the people who keep this country, or the state moving. And I'm sure the public servant over here could have more to say about it. But that's just the way it is. Politically, we need change. There's no doubt about it. And we need to push for people to make sure when they do run, that's what they support.
Can you speak to the fears that we're all experiencing regarding the cuts to Medicaid and Social Security? What is your view, are your views on what is happening, what we might expect, or if you have any idea?
I think any of these cuts are bad. The reality is, all four of our congressionals voted for this budget plan, which is including massive cuts to Medicaid, to SNAP, to a host of our social safety programs that are going to cause irreparable harm to the least of us, okay? I think a lot of the things that we've talked about up here boils down to a real simple phrase, and that's elections have consequences. And when you have a third of the people don't bother to vote, this is what we get. We absolutely have to talk to our friends and our neighbors about the importance of participating in our democracy. The founding fathers didn't think that we were going to have lifetime, I mean lifetime, if you look at Chuck Grassley, who was first elected to public service in 1958. It's like, come on, that's not what this country was founded to do. It's crazy. We need to talk about something different. Both parties have an extreme fringe group. Let's say 10, 15% on each end. Democrats got them too, okay, let's not kid ourselves. So that means there's about 70% of us that live in the middle, but we're not really getting the representation. Everybody is catering to the extremes. And with Citizens United basically legalizing corruption and bribery in government, allowing the richest of the rich to fundamentally purchase a government that caters to their every whim. If you like what's going on, you're probably not in the room. But a lot of people don't participate, and that's killing us, literally. Not figuratively, it's literally going to kill people. Because when we cut these social safety net programs, people's incomes go away. Their health care goes away. Their food assistance goes away. But if we raise taxes on billionaires, nobody dies. We have a real simple choice before us. It's participating in our democracy or allowing others to dictate the terms of our lives. And right now, that's the second scenario is what we're living under. You see people on the inauguration day, did anybody watch that? You know, all the billionaires lined up in a row. It was a eerie and frightening day for me. Should be for everybody. We're, 2.5 months into this 48 months of this administration, and look where we are so far. Very frightening, very frightening.
So the budget plan, the sort of budget framework that's been approved by the House and the Senate now calls for $1.5 trillion in cuts to services. Now, the House had a very specific plan that said $880 billion of cuts to Medicaid, $230 billion of cuts to SNAP, and I don't know, like millions, billions, pretty soon it's real money. So I apologize for all the numbers. The Senate, though, understanding that big cuts to Medicaid and SNAP are not going to be popular, has been very vague about where these cuts are coming from. I mean, I think the threat is very real. I do think there's going to be political pushback, particularly on Medicaid. I think there's a couple areas that are particularly vulnerable. One is they're not getting nearly as much pushback on SNAP, which again is food assistance for low-income families, keeps local grocery stores afloat in rural Iowa. I think they are feeling the pressure on Medicaid. They're not feeling as much pressure on SNAP. So I think that's one area that I think we're really concerned about. And then within Medicaid, I mean, if they were to do the kinds of cuts they're talking about, no population in Medicaid is untouched. And to remember who gets covered by Medicaid, low-income kids mostly. Again, a third of all kids in Iowa are covered by Medicaid. It's also their families. It is people with disabilities, and it's half of all nursing home residents. Now, the population that I think is the most vulnerable, though, is the low-wage workers who gained access to Medicaid in 2013 as part of the Affordable Care Act, right? It's often referred to as Medicaid expansion. Statewide, it covers 181,000 people. I think Republicans have agreed, both at the state level and at the federal level, that that's a population they are willing to throw under the bus, and that's why you hear a lot right now about work reporting requirements. They call them work requirements. I refuse to call it that because what it is really, it's reporting requirements. So it's saying basically for folks in that population, they have to report work hours or some sort of reason for an exemption to the state. So to be clear, it's not the work that's going to cut people off. We know most people on Medicaid actually who can work do work. It is the reporting. Like every month, potentially, people are going to have to log onto a website and report work hours. Look, a lot of these are low-income folks that maybe are paying for data on their phone as they have money to. They move a lot. They might need help with interpreting information that comes in the mail. It's the reporting that cuts people off. And it will cut people off who should be exempt because they're going to have to prove their exemptions. I think
doesn't it increase our cost as well because we have to have somebody who monitors all that reporting crap?
Of course, of course. Now here's the thing. It is true that in the long term, cutting people off Medicaid saves the state money. It does, saves the feds money. Now, people who lose their health insurance don't stop getting sick, they don't stop getting injured, they just stop having health insurance to pay for it. So it means either they suffer more or they'll wait longer and they'll go to the emergency room, right? So eventually we all sort of pay for it. So I think that's a population, I just want you to be inoculated, because at first blush I get it, oh, people who get Medicaid should have to work. But even if you believe that, I'm not actually sure I do, but that there are real reasons why that's a problem. I think that population is particularly vulnerable. When Iowa passed Medicaid expansion in 2013, our uninsured rate among adults was cut in half. And what that means is when people show up at the hospital, they have health insurance. Hospitals have less uncompensated care. Some of the federal resources that were available to hospitals to cover uncompensated care went away when they passed expansion because they're like, we don't need to have this fund for uncompensated care because people will have coverage. Do you think they're going to bring back that extra help for hospitals for uncompensated care? I don't see it. So I think if they really go forward with the degree of cuts they want, everybody's vulnerable. I think the real population we're concerned about are those low-wage workers. And then finally, because I can rant about this, just to remember the nature of low-wage work, right? They don't have benefits. They have unpredictable hours. The governor tried to justify what we're going to do at the state level. And they cherry-picked some data for like 1 month. And then they did a whole bunch of very interesting data techniques to show that, oh no, there's so many people on Medicaid who aren't working. But they picked like 4 weeks in November. We know a lot of folks are working seasonally, right? And so they didn't happen to get enough hours in November because it's a slow month in construction. So they lose their health insurance. So anyway, I think that's the population to be most concerned about.
So can I speak? Oh, go ahead.
So in addition to being an educator, I'm a licensed foster parent. Impacts to Medicaid. It impacts to Medicaid and Social Security and income would directly impact those foster kids. The kiddos that come in through my house are in junior high, high school. What do they do once they're out of the system, once they've aged out? Where do they get their health care from? Who's going to support them? And then there's a double whammy because they're impacted in the schools too. So it isn't just Medicaid, but cuts to special education and academic achievement programs would also mean that those same kids would not be supported in schools or have their health care supported.
So, Mike Johnson, House Speaker, was asked this past week about the Medicaid cuts. Now, we have, I think, 150,000 Medicaid enrollees in our congressional district. 151,000, I believe, when you consider for all the pockets. Mike Johnson was asked up front, he was asked, hey, so you guys want to cut $800 million out of Medicaid. Where are you going to find that? There's no way you're going to find that much to cut out of it unless you really want to cut to the bone. And he said, oh, we're going to find it. And then what he said is he said, we need to get our young, able-bodied, working folks back to work and to stop playing video games. And I was so enraged when I heard that because the vast majority of folks on Medicaid work. And the vast majority of those that don't are on disability, right? And so this goes back to one of the main reasons I wanted to do this kind of town hall is because I think to very reasonable people, they hear Medicaid work requirements and they think, oh, that probably makes sense, right? Like if they don't dig into it. The problem is, like exactly what Ann brought up, with the instability and variability of part-time work, for example. I mean, if you want to hop in my car that's being held together by alien tape and you want to drive around the 4th Congressional District with me, like all this very small towns I'm in, you've got 65-year-old women working at Casey's. And that's very common. It's so infuriating because I was so tone deaf and disconnected and not based in the reality that in rural America, in rural Iowa, in our 4th Congressional District, if you impose work requirements, when there are no jobs in small town Iowa that can help you hit that requirement, people are going to suffer and die due to lack of care. Or, as Ann said, it'll be uncompensable care that we all will then pay for collectively, right? So it kind of all comes back. We're paying for Medicaid, in part, obviously through taxation. If they're trying to make an argument that, oh, the taxpayer is going to save a lot of money, you're not. You're just going to pay for it another way. And then on top of that, Mike Johnson has this reverse. He has this backward. A lot of these folks are working because they have health care, right? A lot of these folks wouldn't be able to work if they didn't have Medicaid. The Medicaid allows them to work. The SNAP benefit allows them to work. I grew up in poverty. My entire childhood, I grew up in a single parent home. My mom, who's come a long way as far as her substance abuse battles, has been clean for a long time, thankfully, but she really struggled with that when I was a kid. Bipolar 1 with psychosis, severe mental health problems, but she did the best she could. We never went homeless, but we were close all throughout our childhood. And she worked 40 plus hours a week. But the other thing too that we haven't talked about yet is how hard it is to get disability approval. So you're going to have this window if they impose work requirements and they'll provide exemptions for if you're on disability. Well, there are millions of Americans that have been applying for years to get on disability, do the best they can to work, but due to mental health or physical health, can't sustain a job. You're going to have those folks that are just completely screwed while they're still waiting years and years for disability to get approved. So there's so many of these gaps and holes and infrastructural deficits that a Mike Johnson simply does not account for. Final thing I'll say in this general context, since we are a heavily rural congressional district, is when I go to the various legislative forums for state electeds, mostly Republican, obviously, in our state, I ask the same question every single time. I say, hey, if you look at the decade-by-decade census data, there has been a massive hollowing out of rural Iowa as far as population for 40-plus years. And when you see that hollowing out, you see a hollowing out of social safety nets as well. And I asked them, what is your plan to address that? Their answer is there is no plan. And why isn't there a plan? I would argue because one party, the party that currently runs the state, is behooved by the hollowing out of rural Iowa. Because who's leaving? People like us. Are they doing any kind of recruitment to keep young people in this state? No. So we need to be active and engaged in rural Iowa because the Republicans that are representing these districts, both at the state and federal level, there's no plan because they like the hollowing out. We got to fight back.
Can you hear me? As I listened to each one of you, I got more and more invested and scared. And when I got to you, I thought, oh, please run. But I was thinking about just my family and my father and grandfather and husband were in the unions. They kept wages fair and kept them safe. I'm on Social Security now, and I have a son who's 20-year vet, 5 times overseas, and is on disability. I have a daughter who's in the research portion of Iowa State, depends on that for her livelihood. I have a family member, a family, who has an autistic child with also some medical issues on Medicaid, and both parents have lost their jobs, one to an accident at work, and the other because of a consolidation of 2 different companies. And I just love you. You've got a lot of facts. And I have both sides of the farming group. We live in the country, we don't farm. I have a small LLC that farms the ground around me, 80 acres. And then I have an ex-husband who farms 5,000 acres. And nearly broke families up over this last election because the farming side, unfortunately, was going to vote for Trump. It got close enough that he just didn't vote, let's put it that way. So, and then there's you. We love you. You make everything so much easier. And the other piece, I guess, in my family that's really frightening me now is having the changes coming like this. You don't really have a chance to respond or to get ready for it. And you're talking in your conversation about losing Social Security and Medicare is very frightening. I'd be crappy as a 75-year-old Casey worker. I'll do it, but I would be. But the one that's not really been talked about a whole great deal is our gay community and how frightened they are. I have family members who are married, have biological through IVF children who felt it was important enough to go cross-adopt so that they, if their marriage is dissolved, they still have impact in their rights with their children. And the same thing with their spouses, that they have to get the power of attorney for health care. They can't, I don't understand it. And it's frightening to me. And I think it's important, even though we aren't filled up, which I wish we had been, I know I'm going to be talking about what was said here, and I think it's important to keep doing this. And thank you, God, for driving 4 hours because it meant a lot to those of us that are here, but it also shows how invested you are to making things better.
Let me comment on that real quick, just real quick, because you tied all of these things together so well. And as someone who ran for a state office, it's the challenge for me to know which issues to prioritize. When you start running for office, people ask, what are your issues? And we are at a point now where there are so many issues, I can't select 3 to run on. The one that I think underlies that, I'm an engineer by training, right? So I like to ask why, and then somebody gives you an answer, and you ask why again. They say the 5 whys, that's it. Why? The root issue in my mind that we need to be talking about is what is the role of government? What type of government do we want to have, and what do we want them doing? Do we want them supporting people, improving quality of life for everybody? That's how I grew up in the 80s and 90s in Iowa when we had really good public education. That's what we learned our government was about. Or do we want what we have today, where things that I used to think are conspiracy theories, I don't think are conspiracy theories quite so much anymore. Where we've got a government that's really about prioritizing the ultra-wealthy and their wants and wishes. And we've got to be talking about that. Government malfeasance. What is the role of government? And who is going to fulfill the role of government that we want to see? Sorry for interrupting.
In response to what can we do, with summer approaching, we could turn out in numbers to the parades. Numbers speaks volumes, and I know I plan on attending them. Hopefully, the local Democrats can get behind me and join me in those. And thank you all for coming out today.
Yes, I just want to say thank you again for coming out Saturday morning like this. In terms of things that we can do to address these issues, we've heard. Thank you. We've heard about contacting the politicians who disagree with us because it's been working to slow things down. We've heard about contacting the politicians that generally do agree with us to kick them in the pants and get them going. We've heard about attending the rallies and the parades and doing these things. How can we support the politicians that do get it? The ones that are out there who maybe are already moving in the right direction and starting to speak up, or the ones who are maybe on the fence and still a little bit quiet because they've got those future ambitions for something else. How do we show them that they have the support to be brave, to do something that we need them to do?
This will be our last question just because we're up against 11 and I don't want to step on Boone Pride, for example. Where's Boone, the green space down? Okay, so I don't want to step on their toes, so thank you for the question. So a few things come to mind. And I can speak obviously most directly through my perspective. I don't take corporate money, I'm not a wealthy guy, I don't have wealthy friends. And so my campaigns have been very grassroots. So we've been powered by volunteers. And there's a lot of things that volunteers can do to help a political candidate get their word out. For example, postcard writing. We got 40,000 postcards out last time. And we can do better if I run again this time, I think. So amassing a big postcard writing army. And a lot of people really enjoy doing that because a lot of folks did it in a group setting. So they hung out, had some dinner, and wrote a bunch of postcards. Helping a candidate like me who doesn't have a lot of money, who's grassroots, is maybe covering the postage of those postcards because that's an in-kind contribution. We report it that way. But that saved us thousands and thousands of dollars we otherwise wouldn't have had in in-kind contributions. So that's one. The other thing too is I think that one problem we often have is a lot of folks think, if I volunteer, I'm committing myself to something that I may not have enough time for. Well, if you want to be a volunteer and you say, hey, I've got a full-time job, I got a family at home, I can't give you as much time as I wish I could, we can work with that. Okay, what do you like to do? What are you willing to do? What is your capacity? I can create a Google spreadsheet to chart out capacity per person, and we can figure it out. The other thing is as left-leaning folks, or heck, even right-leaning folks who are just fed up, and there's more and more of those too who want to get involved with a campaign like mine, there's this thought from a lot of folks that I'm the only Democrat in my community. I'm the only Democrat on my block. Like when you get up to like Sioux Center, ooh, we're Democrats lucky to get 10% of the vote. But I can tell you, if you go to a Sioux County Democrats meeting, there's often 20, 30 people there. I spoke to a room of 50 people in Sioux Center, Iowa last cycle. And so there's this fear, especially in the redder parts of the district. I mean, Boone County, I got almost 40%. That's pretty good. It's not good enough, but compared to a 10% up in Sioux County, right? So this is not as much of a problem in Boone County, maybe, but if you have friends in deeper red Iowa who are really concerned about jumping out there, let them know that when they jump out there, the other Democrats are going to find them and they're going to jump out there and join them. There's one woman, I think she's 83 years old, and I forget the name of the town, but she just decided one day, she was pissed a month ago, and she said, screw this, I'm doing something. And she made a sign and stood out in front of the post office and just held the sign. The next week there were 3 people, the next week there were 7 people, and it's building. And so if you're feeling afraid to volunteer, if you're feeling afraid to get out there because you think you're the only one, you're not. And I can show you the voter registration data to show you actually on your block there are 3 other Democrats or 3 other independents that voted, you know. So you're definitely not alone, even if sometimes it feels that way out here.
And amplifying the message of your candidate.
Yes.
Get on their social media, share their information to your social media. That's huge.
That is huge.
And you can volunteer, especially for young people who are social media mavens. Create content for them. That is a great way to volunteer. I can make TikToks for you.
Penny's my favorite TikToker, by the way.
Is it because I did on?
One of the many reasons.
So yeah, amplifying our message through your networks is great. And then invite your friends to say, let's go to, you know, there is a campaign event. Let's go.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not quite 83, but I've been at this since I was a college freshman when I volunteered for Bobby Kennedy's campaign.
Wow.
So it's not my first trip around the block.
And thank you again, by the way, for everything you've done to help get this together today.
My pleasure. And what I do on a regular basis is this. Anyone can do this. I do it at my home, as you know. Every time we're in the cycle, I have fundraisers. There are Democrats in Boone County, I can attest to it. And we just gather at my backyard. We have pizza, and we try to raise a little bit of money to pay for stamps. And we've been very successful doing this. Have a block party. Invite your neighbors. You may not know that you are surrounded by people who are not used to stepping out of the box. But there are people who want change, and they will come. So, you know, do, like you said, get in touch with your candidates, do anything you can. We can't all individually do it all. We do what we can. So, and spreading the word about today's experience is part of that. Talk to your relatives and friends. Ask them to get in touch with these experts if they have questions, if they are afraid and concerned. Anything you do is going to help, and it does make a difference. All right, go ahead.
Thank you. Did you want to?
I just want to ask one last quick question. I'm a single mom to a 16-year-old and a 20-year-old, and we moved here from Colorado 10 years ago in the search for a slower, quieter life. And we found that here. My kids have loved going to school here. They love the pace and their friends and all of those things. But on the current trajectory, I keep finding myself thinking, why should we stay? Why should I let them raise their kids here? So, but just love some input on that.
I'll finish off with that, and then we'll close up shop. Thank you so much for the question. So my brother's trans. I have a lot of trans folks that I love very much, and they feel obviously incredibly frightened. I've had a lot of young women come to my events who are incredibly frightened as far as the taking away of reproductive rights. I could just list off so many different groups of people that are afraid right now. And the common impulse for many of them is to leave the state, right? And I am never going to make someone feel ashamed of doing what is right for their family, for their kids. I'm not going to do that. What I will say, though, is, and this is why I think we need to continue to dig to find the fire and the belly leaders around here. There are a lot of people here that want to fight the good fight. And the front lines of democracy in 2025 and 2026, Iowa is one of those front lines because this is a laboratory for the massive stripping away of freedoms, rights, and protections that we thought were sacrosanct, right? And so my pitch to folks who are thinking about leaving is, first of all, if you need to do that for your family, I get it, I understand. But if you're willing to stay, take pride in fighting the good fight, because this is the front line of that battle. And then let's support each other. Let's pick each other up. Let's love each other, because we need all the support we can. We need all the lifting up we can. And I promise whatever I'm doing, I'll play my part, and I hope we all do the same. So, thank you. Well, it's time, and I want to respect Boone Pride, so I don't want to step on their toes. Thank you so much for coming out. I really appreciate it. So just really quick, as far as schedule for next week, on Monday, if you're interested, JD Schulten and I are going to be moderating a town hall that's not of my design. It's going to be a lot different than this one, which is fine. But that's going to be at the Public Library in Ames Monday evening. You can go find the Story County Democrats on Facebook and find the details there. My next town hall that will have the same format, you'll see some of the same people at, is Tuesday evening. Doors open 6:30. We start at 7 in Humble at the community center there. And then next Saturday in Storm Lake, again, you'll see some of the same people, some different folks. Next Saturday morning at 11, Storm Lake Common Room Elementary School. If you can't remember all that, you can just follow me on social media, and I do the best I can to advertise not only those events, but the events of others that I think would be really value add too. And then there's interest to do a lot more of these across the 4th Congressional District going into May and June, so there'll probably be more. But let's keep on keeping on. Thanks so much, everybody.
And one last thing from me, this Monday, 8:30 a.m., Erickson Public Library, 2nd floor, Senator Green and Representative Bain will be there for a public forum. This is the last one they're going to have.